everybody. Thank you. Comments are still coming in. Welcome to the June 1st, 2023 Historic Landmark Commission meeting. Babs DeLay, our chair, is excused from this meeting, so I'll be leading it as the vice chair. In attendance tonight, we have Kenton Peters, Michael Vella, Carlton Getz, Amanda DeLucia, and Emily Kearns. Michael Abramson is excused as well, along with Babs. So starting on our agenda, do I have any motion on approval of last month's meeting minutes? Someone, Mr. Ed.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from the May meeting. You get that right?
Yeah.
I can second that.
Okay, great. We have a motion from Amanda to approve and Mike to second. Let's just go down the line. Kenton?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Carlton?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so we pass last month's meeting minutes. Report of the chair and vice chair. I have nothing tonight. Report of the director.
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we move along to any public comments not pertaining to the items listed on the agenda. I don't have any cards, but if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on any matters of preservation other than those on the agenda, now's your time. Okay, seeing nobody. Let's move into the public hearings for tonight. So first we have a major alteration for a rear addition at approximately 1454 East Harvard Avenue. And Aiden will be presenting on behalf of the Planning Department.
Yes. Good evening, commissioners. I know almost all of you, but my name's Aiden.
Aiden, one sec. Emily's going to recuse from this session.
Yes.
So just wanted to put that in the record.
Yes, so the proposal tonight is a major alteration application at 1454 East Harvard Avenue. The requested alterations for this major alteration application include the construction of a rear addition and a detached garage on the site. Additionally, the applicant is requesting a modification to the base zoning to allow for an increase in height to the detached garage. That increased height request is for 6 feet and 7 inches above the allowed 15 feet. Here on this slide, I have the proposed site plan where you can see where the rear addition will be located, as well as the detached garage proposal. Staff is recommending approval for this application with a condition that later design be allocated to administrative staff level approval. So this property is a contributing site to the Harvard Heights Local Historic District. It is an English cottage style structure that was constructed in 1926. It's also located in the Yale-Crest National Historic District and is in the R1 7000 zoning district, as well as the Yale-Crest Compatible Infill Overlay zoning district. So here you have the 1934 tax photograph, so taken less than 10 years after its construction. Here are some current conditions of this site. You can see the primary elevation, and I also have an image of the west elevation where you can see the existing non-historic rear addition that is currently on the site that will be removed and replaced by the proposed rear addition. Here I have the existing west and east elevation drawings as well as the proposed west and east elevation drawings. These images were included in the body of the staff report. However, in the attachment for the building plans, unfortunately, I had attached a previous rendition of the plan set, but there is a correct plan set that has been uploaded into the Dropbox for you all to review. Ultimately, the changes included some material change, so you can see here on the proposed east elevation, the applicant has included some breaking up in materials. So there's a painted lap siding on the rear addition that will be in contrast to the historic brick to be able to read the proposed addition from the existing historic structure, as well as a jog that is being proposed in between the historic structure and the proposed addition. As noted in the staff reports, staff did meet several times with the applicant to discuss changes to the design to better allow this proposal to meet the standards and design guidelines. So I have that outlined in the staff report. But here are those elevations, and here's the existing north and proposed, as well as the existing south and proposed elevation. So on the historic portion of the structure, the applicant is proposing to replace the existing non-historic windows with truly divided wood windows that match the profile and light pattern of the historic structure. And then no other alterations to the primary facade. And on the south elevation, you can see in the existing the view of where the non-historic addition, post-1950s non-historic addition is located, as well as the board and batten proposed addition on the rear, as well as the wall dormer on this rear south elevation. On the detached garage proposal, this is the 21-foot 7-inch in height detached garage. The dormers, the gable, and the pitch match what is on the structure and is compatible in design in that way. Ultimately, as outlined in the analysis and findings in the staff report, it's staff's opinion that the proposed construction of a detached garage and new addition to the existing contributing structure at 1454 East Harvard Avenue generally meets the applicable standards of approval, and staff recommends that the Historic Landmark Commission approves the request with the following condition: that approval of all final design details, including specific direction expressed by the commission, shall be delegated to planning staff. Now we have the applicant and their consultant that will come up and talk to you all. Thank you.
Whichever one you want, because there's...
Thanks. Please state your name when you start.
Okay. Hi, my name is Emily Foxley, and I'm the property owner of 1454 East Harvard Avenue. First, I would just like to thank you guys for your hard work and the preservation efforts of the Historic Landmark Commission. I'm here tonight with my husband, Colin Strasser, and on behalf of my young family, my two sons, Jack and George. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a background. My husband and I met when we were both living on Laird Avenue, and we would walk the neighborhood and fell in love with Harvard, and it was always a dream to live on this street. We ended up moving out of the neighborhood, but always wanted to move back. We loved the mature trees and all of the unique architecture and the walkability, and so when this home became available, we were ecstatic. We dove into this binder here, the Preservation Handbook, and the 266 pages, I quickly learned as much as I could, but realized I was not an expert in this field. So I was grateful enough to meet with Kirk Huffaker and hire him to help me with our application and our plans and the process, which has been really invaluable to us. So he is here and will address you after my remarks. The home was built in 1926. It's had only a handful of owners since it was built. So we feel very lucky to be able to buy this home and do a project that honors the history of the home and also adds some modern functionality for our family. Let's see. We are very committed to using high-quality materials, engaging local artisans, and constructing an addition and rehabilitating the home so that it can last another 100 years or more, hopefully. We understand that our role is to be the steward of this property and embrace the history and also maintain it so that it can be enjoyed for many, many years to come. We have a deep appreciation for the neighborhood and the character and for the preservation efforts of the commission, and we appreciate your time and consideration very much.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, does anyone have questions for the applicant or for planning staff?
On the garage, you're asking for quite a significant height increase. What is the reason for this?
So the reason for the height increase is we wanted the pitch of the roof to match the existing pitch of the home. We felt like this was a historically accurate pitch to ask for, and the use of the height is for storage.
So you're really looking for space above the parking of the garage. It appeared that that pitch was bearing much higher than on the original garage, which also appeared to have the steep pitch of the roof.
I believe that the pitch of the existing garage and the new proposed garage are the same.
Yeah, but the existing garage managed to stay a lot lower. I mean, where the roof starts to pitch appears to be significantly higher.
If I may engage Kirk on this, I'm not, sorry, the pitches and some of those things, I get a little
Fair
overwhelming
enough.
to me.
What I'm getting at is I'm concerned about that extra tall garage in proximity to the neighbors, because you're able to put this only a foot from the property lines, which is as per zoning.
Yeah.
But that's a large structure to be that close to the neighbors.
I do know during public comment, the neighbor directly to the east of me is here, and he was going to speak to the garage and the height. So you will hear from him later.
Okay.
But yes, that is the one exception we had asked for, was the height for the
Okay.
garage.
I guess I'd also have a little concern about the mass of the addition and the proximity to the property on the west, because you're extending the large mass of the house further into the backyard.
Sure.
And, I know you are complying with zoning there, but
Yes.
just the proximity, living in a nearby neighborhood, I know that
Yeah.
proximity and volumes are quite important there, so.
Absolutely. We did work on several different iterations of the plan, and we worked closely with Aiden to come up with some ideas on how to break up the mass and to have what we were presenting today be meet the guidelines and the standards. And so we do realize that we are expanding the footprint, but we have done our best to have that be within the guidelines and the standards.
And
Thank you.
Kenton, just
Yes.
one extra point there. It does continue to step in as you go further back, and so there are little step-ins. It's not, a step in and then straight back. It continues to step in to get away from the property line.
Other questions?
I guess, Vice Chair, could I make a couple of comments? Would that
Yes.
be okay?
Yeah, take it
Thank
away.
you.
Yep.
My name's Kirk Huffaker. I'm the consultant to the property owners for this project. And I really came in, I think, fairly late in the process. They actually did a lot of this work on their own as lay people, learning all of the language and regulations and guidance that is out there. And they really digested all of that. And so what you see is really the work product of the owners and their architect. I also want to just give some commendation to Aiden and Michaela for their guidance as well. I know there's been several meetings to get to this point, so as always, staff is very helpful. I think to me, the most important thing about this project is that the facade is actually going in a positive direction. We're going back to windows that match that historic photo. They've all been changed out. They're double hung and they're older, but the owners would like to go back to the casement windows that really bring back that Tudor English cottage sort of style. So that's an important change in the positive direction. And that this is an addition, though large in the rear, you cannot see it from the facade. And really, you can't see it from the street except for an acute angle as you're walking down the sidewalk from west to east, or from east to west, where the driveway is, because that's the larger side setback for the house. So it's really limited in terms of what you can see from the public right-of-way. They've taken care to really protect that front facade and make this addition stand out on its own, have it be historically appropriate, yet distinguished for its own time, which is always, a tricky balance. What was my last point? I talked about the step-ins as being one of the strong points of the design as well. And so I hope you see that there has been time and care taken through the process. There have been changes, and they feel like this is something workable for their family that can be sustainable for many years, and be really an investment in the neighborhood and this particular property. So we thank you for your time.
Thank you. If there's no more questions for the applicant or for staff, we're going to open up a hearing. Yes, Carl?
I did have one. I hadn't noticed this actually the first time I looked at this, but I do see that on the, I'm going to call it the front left, if you're facing the house, where there's the entry door on the side, that you are modifying that area that's more towards the front of the house slightly.
Here comes Aiden.
Could you speak just a little bit to what's driving the impact in that area, which is more in the public view? Or
Carlton, sorry.
am I still looking at the old version?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I'm so sorry. The correct plan set is now uploaded as a separate document in that file in the Dropbox. So that actually was a compromise that the applicant made that would have been an addition to a very visible original facade in order to enlarge their staircase. So they were willing to remove that section to be able to totally retain that secondary but original facade. So I'm
Excellent.
sorry about that.
My concern is answered. No,
That
that's
was my
great.
mistake.
Great, perfect, thanks.
And I think that was an important compromise, actually, because the owners really wanted that. And so, but they felt like for the overall better plan for the house, that it was worth removing that.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any comment cards from the public for this agenda item, but there may be some people in the audience wishing to speak to this matter. Yeah, okay, come on up to, are we doing it
Come,
at the microphone in the,
either or.
okay. Yeah, just sit up front here and speak into the microphone and state your name, please, when you.
I'll do that. First of all, I feel lucky to have gotten here for a parking spot today. I'm the neighbor to the east of Colin and Emily, and I have a very historic house that I spent a lot of time restoring. And the house that they're working on, unfortunately, had some things taken out of it back probably in the 60s. The windows, it lacks some of the character features that they're trying to put back in. So I was over there for a couple hours with them last week, just as she was going through the plans and showing me what their plans were and why they were doing what they were doing. And I think she's tried really, Colin and Emily have tried really hard to keep it feel like the neighborhood and the 1920s houses that exist on that block. So I'm also the neighbor to the garage. And there's about a 4-foot step up from my lot down to their lot. So for me, I'd much rather have the taller garage and the correct pitch on the garage than having a garage that looks like it's from the 1960s and the pitch is wrong. Because most of the existing, my garage is an original garage that has that type of pitch. So I feel like it doesn't impact my yard at all. I have a tree there, and then again, I have a 4-foot step up, so their garage from my side won't look as tall. And then Karen, on the other side, I don't think she'd see the garage as much as I would on my side. So I've looked at everything. I think they've done a great job, and they're trying really hard to make it look right. I understand why young families want these additions and why they, I mean, I live in an impractical house with, you know, little closets, and so having some of the features that people look for nowadays, I think makes sense. But I'm impressed with what they're trying to do. I think they're doing a great job. And anything that they showed me on those plans, I'm 100% in on, including the height of the garage. Like I
Great.
said, it's important for me to have that pitch look right than to have a pitch that doesn't match that 1920s architecture.
Okay,
'Cause
great.
it's a Tudor, it's not a bungalow.
Yeah,
So, anyway,
okay, thank you. State your name?
Bob Plum.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thanks. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
There's a good picture in the staff report, commissioners, just showing that retaining wall and the fence that Mr. Plum was speaking to. It's in the staff report.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this agenda item? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. The applicant has a chance to respond to the comments, but I don't know if that's really necessary in this case. And with that, I'll close the public hearing and we'll go into executive session. So commissioners, what are your thoughts?
Well, since you're looking at, since you're looking at me, I'll go ahead and comment. You know, I'm looking at Google Earth right now, and I'm looking at, you know, from the perspective of the neighbor. I think everything that is proposed on the house, with the gables matching, with the windows matching, it's a good addition. And you know, you'll see it a little bit from the east, but you'd have to be looking for it. It's not the primary facade, so I think everything on the house, you know, makes sense. I am a little, I'm not concerned, but you will see this new garage. That's at the end of this double driveway that's shared between the two houses. It feels like it matches the neighborhood. You know, the pitch, you know, could be different, but you know, looking straight on at the elevations, it feels like it matches the house and the rest of the neighborhood. Those would be my comments.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to take it from there? Sounds like the garage is kind of a conversation point.
I would just like to say that I was initially taken a bit aback by the size of the addition, the proposal. So it was good to hear from the neighbor that it feels like it does fit with the neighborhood and that it maintains that historic context. So I'll let you all decide about the garage.
Ken, what are your thoughts? You were asking the question.
Yes, I brought up the garage partially because I've run into situations in East Side neighborhoods where you couldn't do an appropriate garage because of the height limits in the zoning ordinance, but they weren't in the historic zone, so we didn't have an avenue for getting an exemption. And, you know, that was,
That's the beauty of the overlay, Kenton.
yeah. But, you know, that's how it just came to mind. I was concerned. It was good to hear Bob say that he didn't think it was an issue there. I agree with keeping the pitch like as it is to match the house. You know, you could do the same but give up your storage space. But thinking about that street, there's lots of other big things going on there. I don't think it's going to be an issue. Likewise, with the overall size of the addition, my first thought is, why is so much space needed? You know, that's making a big house. You know, in these day and age, I think people tend to overbuild, looking at it from a environmental level, that too much house, you know, buildings add a huge amount to our carbon emissions. Yet again, going back to Harvard and having walked up and down that street many times, it's not out of scale with other things that are there. And it's not for me to question how much space someone thinks they need, even though I do. But anyhow, I'm okay. I think they've done a good job in trying to make a compatible design and fit it into the neighborhood and provide a really nice living space for the family. So I'm good with it.
Thank you. Carlton, any thoughts?
I don't have a whole lot to add other than that, you know, I would say that having seen the old plans and not recognize it, I was looking at the wrong set still. You know, I appreciate that the owners have taken the time to research what they did per the comments earlier in advance of the design and understand what they're trying to do. I appreciate that you're trying to restore a lot of elements that have been lost over time and bring those back. And I also appreciate the willingness to compromise on that one feature that we just discussed a moment ago, because I do think that would have been critical if that had been in there. But given that you were willing to revise that plan and look at other options that turned out to be acceptable, I think is a very positive comment on the overall project.
Agreed. Do we have a motion from anybody?
I can have a motion, if we consistent with the staff recommendation. It's a motion to approve based on the information presented. There we go. Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the Historic Landmark Commission approve this application with the following modifications: that the approval of all final details, including specific direction expressed by the commission, shall be delegated to planning staff. I don't know that there's any direction expressed by the planning staff, so it's as it is. That would be the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, great. Mike made the motion. Carlton seconded. Kenton?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Carlton?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Emily is abstaining, and I am an aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. Thanks to the applicants and to staff.
While he's kind of pulling up his presentation, David is struggling with the caterers and the Pride Festival out there, so apologies on dinner.
I apologize. An attachment that I had, or a presentation that I had put on the, into the shared drive isn't on this computer, so give me 2 minutes to make sure I have that document.
You got it. let me introduce this next item quickly. We have Trolley North new construction at approximately 675 East 500 South. And we have Aaron Barlow with city staff to present.
Thank you. This is a request for new construction at 675 East 500 South. This is a request that I'm bringing back to you, the applicant has brought back to you after the commission tabled the request, tasking the applicant to make a number of revisions to their initial application. So just some background on what's happened since then. On January 5th, the commission reviewed this item and tabled the request with a number of requested revisions. Planning staff sent out a letter laying out those revisions, and that letter is included in the staff report. That letter is dated January 17th, 2023. The motion made to table the request failed to include keeping the public hearing open. So on February 2nd, 2023, the commission reopened the public hearing in order to enable people to speak at this meeting today. It didn't change anything with the application. It was just a second motion to extend the conversation. And then between then and now, planning staff worked with the applicant through a number of iterations on the project. What you're seeing today is not the first or second draft. This is after 3 or 4 times going back and forth with planning staff. So it's been a long road up to this point. So with that, just a brief summary. This is new construction within a local historic district. It's within the Central City Historic District on the corner of 700 East and 500 South. Nearby historic resources include the Molloy Hancock Mansion, which is directly to the north, Ensign Floral, which is part of the Liberty Square development next to the Smith's gas station on 600 East. There is the Trolley Square block immediately to the south, which is separated from the development by the Whole Foods parking lot. This will be reviewed against the TSA UNC district standards. That's TSA Urban Neighborhood Core district standards, as well as the historic preservation overlay standards for new construction and the multifamily design guidelines for new construction in a historic district. There are a number of requested modifications, and the impact of those they've been addressed through this design process, but these modifications are still requested. The first is a maximum setback for a corner side yard, the Green Street property. Well, we can look at this vicinity map. Here it is, the zoning map. And the Green Street section of this property requires a setback to accommodate fire access and fire ladders. And so that's the first request. The second is the spacing of building entrances on a street-facing facade. The requirement is every 40 feet. The applicant has made significant strides and improvements on the request to meet the intent of this standard, but there are still areas where this modification is required, and I will get into that in my presentation. And then the building facade length is still an issue here, but they have done several things to soften the size of the masses and the perceived scale, and I'll talk about that as well. So just context, here's the buildings that are currently on the property. There's the Sitla building, as well as Big Daddy's Pizza. The Sitla building is known as the Xerox building to some people around here. I do not know it as the Xerox building. And then just some other photos here. There's the Molloy Mansion on the right, as well as another shot of the State Trust building. Here's Big Daddy's Pizza. As discussed earlier in the meeting, both of these properties are buildings on the subject property are non-contributing structures. The Big Daddy's Pizza, a administrative interpretation was made in 2022 regarding this specific property. It was found that there are several features that were lost on this property that warranted a change in status from the contributing status that was on the original survey in 2013 to today. They had widened the facade. There is, and you can look into that. There's a link in the staff report, but that's not what is before you today. Here's Green Street, and you can see here currently the parking garage, the garage for the Xerox building goes right up against Green Street, and fire does require an additional setbacks for a building at the height that they are proposing. There's Liberty Square to the west, a building that was, or a project that was reviewed by this commission. Okay, now I'll go over some of these revisions here, that the things that changed between then and now. So I kind of broke them up into the different subsections that were laid out in the letter. So first off were details within the plan. The commission asked for a streetscape study that was better than what they had provided. The commission asked for a shade study showing the impact this property would have on, this project would have on adjacent properties. There were a few things in the plan that were not accurate, and staff has reviewed these plans, and nothing of significance is out of place. And there were two issues brought up by the neighbor in the landscaping plan and in the shade study. And I know it's very last minute, but the applicant has provided modified plans that show the correct location of the house in the shade study and in the landscape plans, and those are in the Dropbox. It does not change the proposal at all. It's more for accuracy so that we can focus on the proposal and not on the plans. And then also providing some detail about the floor plans and how exactly it interacts with the public way, specifically along 700 East. So here is just illustrating the difference between the original plans and the revised plans. They're much clearer, they are easier to read, and there are some details in there. The locations of doors are more clearly marked. You can see here are doors as opposed to the old plans where it's not very clear where the doors are. Same here. So the streetscape studies, the proposal includes not only the proposed streetscape, but the existing streetscape, and provides details about how the project relates to buildings within the vicinity. You can see they've tried to connect the scale to Liberty Square, to other development nearby, to Station 424, and even with the step back to the Malloy Mansion. You can see here the building, the Trolley Square buildings here, that's actually Whole Foods over there on the 500 South, or yeah. Here is the shadow study showing what the impact of the property will have on specifically the Hancock Mansion. You can see there are times, especially in the winter, when there will be an impact, but it's important to remember that there are certain property rights that are granted in the TSA UNC district, and while the historic preservation overlay does take precedence, it cannot limit the extent to which the zoning district permits development on the lot. So we'll keep moving here. As far as scale and design goes, there are additional things changed kind of to show how the project relates to the surroundings, how it softens and features the Hancock Mansion, changes to the facade and breaking up the mass to lower the scale and the perceived size of the building, and additional ground floor unit entries, especially along Green Street. So first off, the relationship to the surroundings. Those streetscape studies show how the design elements of the building relate to adjacent structures. And while everything is not perfect, it does show how the scale is related to Trolley Square, Liberty Square, the Malloy Mansion, Station 424, and other buildings. Here's another just featuring what exactly has been done to soften the impact on the Malloy Mansion, and I had too much fun with PowerPoint, you'll see as we move forward. So first off, there's a new step back on that northeast corner. They've lined up the step back with the height of the mansion, and they've provided additional glazing at this corner. There's also glazing on the southwest corner along Green Street in a similar manner. Again, along the north facade, there is a landscape wall. Not only is there brick, which is not required in the TSA UNC district, this is an additional feature beyond what is required in the TSA district. The additional glazing, and then the new step back, which is approximately 15-ish feet back from 7th East and 50 feet back from the house. And also a landscape buffer separating the building. This also enables the Hancock Mansion to maintain access to their parking lot in the rear due to the nature of the property, which is pretty common in historic districts. The drive aisle between the property line and the house it's less than 10 feet. This space allows vehicles with large mirrors, I'm thinking F-150s or whatever, to be able to make it through to the rear of the building. As far as facade mass goes, they provided this facade study to represent the massing at each street-facing facade and how that scale has been broken up in the size. It's still a very large building, but it's been broken up into these different elements so that it's not overbearing on pedestrians, and it kind of blends in with surrounding development. One thing that I wanted to highlight is the new entries on Green Street. These are, in the previous proposal, there were no entries along Green Street, and now not only do we have entries, but they are porches. They're sunken porches, and they've been kind of framed, and you can see that in the renderings for Green Street, creating this element that helps engage the units with Green Street, improving placing eyes on the street and improving the experience for everybody, from Liberty Square to people using it to get to tracks, to the residents of this building. So just a closer look at them, the improved porch design. All right, as far as site layout goes, 700 East, this facade is built right up to the property line, and that has been a point of consternation for planning staff and for other individuals, but staff is comfortable with the changes that have been provided, that the proposed setback meets the standards for the historic preservation, for the new construction. So first off, there's this downward movement of masses toward the Malloy Mansion. There's additional glazing. You see how much fun I had here. There's a step back, a landscape buffer, and the additional setback that was not there before, 9 extra feet of setback. Door spacing that I mentioned earlier, they still need a modification to the zoning requirement in the TSA district, but they have vastly improved the number of doors that are along each entry. For the Green Street and the 500 South facades, they are averaging 40 feet of separation between each door. There is an outdoor plaza on the 700 East facade, and this is the largest gap of about 94 feet. But the additional amenities here, the outdoor space, this staff is comfortable that this is an appropriate modification to the TSA zoning requirements. Landscaping was one thing that was brought up by the commission, and the plans that were submitted before were very unclear about where trees were going, what the landscaping was doing along walkways and within the plazas, and they provided an extensive landscaping plan, not only for the ground floor, but for the plaza on the 4th floor podium, where there will be amenities in the amenity deck. Another feature or thing that the commission brought up was the utility box along 700 East. that was located here. It was a ventilation box for the first floor of parking. That has been moved, and now there is additional ventilation on the north facade. Finally, it was unclear about the panel size for this material that they provided, the metal paneling. So they have provided clearer detail for every material proposed here, the size of the panel, and in addition to the size of the panel, they provided details about how the materials articulate. They provided specific architectural renderings of how our drawings showing at each point of change what that looks like from a profile view. So you can get a feel for the texture of the building and what that articulation would look like from the street. So like I mentioned, the requested modifications here is a better illustration of Green Street. They would need to set it back from Green Street to accommodate the fire access, but it also provides that pedestrian walkway that is not present currently along this stretch. But in addition to this walkway will also include lighting. It has shade trees. It has things that are typically required for a mid-block walkway in other districts where we would require amenities for mid-block walkways. Interesting looking C there. The facade length, the 700 East facade is now narrower than 200 feet. So a modification is no longer required for that facade. But for 500 South, it is still 298 feet, and Green Street it is 214 feet. You can see on the 500 South facade, they provided that mural. That is a stand-in. It will not be the postcard drawing that was on the plans. The applicants can speak more about who they have partnered with for that, but it will not be the 1920s, what do you call that, lithograph? And then along Green Street, they have that pedestrian walkway. They've added the ground floor entries. They also have the changes in vertical plane and materials. The massing has been broken up. So staff is recommending approval for this modification. And then the building entrances, like I mentioned, it's a 40-foot average for the Green Street facade and the 500 South facade. So in staff's opinion, it meets the intent of the code, but still does require that modification. And along 700 East, there's that outdoor amenity space, outdoor plaza, that will take care of and provide additional space for pedestrians and in addition to the plaza, there's additional transparency on the ground floor. It's an improvement on the previous proposal. They mentioned they still had issues with the grading there, but it's still an appropriate modification. So yeah, staff is recommending approval because it generally meets the standards. It meets the zoning and design standards with the modifications that were requested, and it complies with and fulfills master plan policies. And then there's one recommended condition about the lighting. At this stage in the process, lighting isn't usually finalized, and staff is confident that we can line up the actual lighting plan with what has been proposed in the illustrations and the renderings. And with that, we'll move to the applicant's presentation, and there's a whole team here, so I will get things set up for them.
Thank you, Aaron.
So, absolutely. So I've just pulled it up. Give me water. Oh, you're good.
Good evening. My name is Michael Augustine with Alta Terra Real Estate. First, I want to thank the Commission for having us here this evening. I also want to thank the Commission for the feedback and responses through the Record of Action letter that allowed us to work with the city staff to make appropriate revisions that meet all of the city standards. I also really want to thank Aaron Barlow and the city planning staff for the multiple meetings, via virtual, in-person, phone calls to just help us understand and clarify the responses from the commission, the concerns from the staff, and to allow us to make the revisions and get some clarity that, we're meeting the city standards and zoning regulations. I'd also like to thank the Murdochs as well, the owners of the Malloy property, for their time and feedback. I'm sitting here to flip through the staff report images as we go through our presentation. As Aaron stated, we have worked with city staff through several iterations from January to May of 2023. We're very appreciative of that time. This allowed us to address the comments given to us by the commission and the city staff contained in the record of action letter. We have made significant changes and concessions to our project, most to satisfy city requirements and others to address neighbor concerns and to ensure that we comply with city standards and ordinances. I'd like to address just a handful of topics that Aaron touched on slightly. Starting with scale and design. As Aaron noted and shown in the plans, we have made considerable plan revisions in an attempt to mitigate the anticipated impact on the adjacent Malloy building, including the following. Increasing the setback from the north property line from 0 feet to 9 feet 8 inches, where no setback is required per the TSA district. By doing so, we've reduced the number of parking spaces from 382, which was in our previous design, to 327 in our new proposed design, or a reduction of 55 parking spaces. This setback also puts the north wall of our building approximately 19 feet 2 inches from the closest wall of the Malloy building. Previously, it was at our property line and approximately 9.5 feet. Our setback of approximately 19 feet 2 inches is greater than the recently approved Station 424 setback of roughly 14 to 16 feet from its south building face to the closest wall of the Malloy building. We step back the front 15 feet of the upper floors, which are floors 4 through 8, from 700 East back at the northeast corner of the building. The step back occurs at a height of roughly 27 feet. At the same northeast corner, we step back the building 44 feet from the north to south, away from the Malloy property. The base of the building where the step back occurs is now 27 feet tall, which is approximately the same height as the top of the roof of the Malloy building. The step back of the upper floors from the Malloy property greatly exceeds the recently approved Station 424 development. As a reference point, the southernmost building face of the recently approved Station 424 project is only 14 to 16 feet from the north wall and does not provide any step back away from the Malloy building, going all the way up, as noted in the December 22 HLC meeting. As Aaron mentioned, climbing vines along the section of the north wall that is adjacent to the Malloy property. Excuse me, this is. Here we go. Excuse me 1 second as I get to our plans. Climbing vines along the section of the north wall that is adjacent to the Malloy building property. A landscape buffer between the structure and the north property line within the added 9 feet 8 inch setback. Additional fenestration and glazing on every floor, every floor actually, of the northeast corner facade, all illustrated in this elevation. To reduce the proposed building's perceived scale, we have implemented several design elements to mitigate the length and height of the street-facing facades. As noted previously, 700 East, which was a modification request on our previous application due to us exceeding 200 feet, no longer exceeds 200 feet. The facade facing Green Street now features more openings, which now meets the required 40-foot separation at the base, and large windows, which have been included on all upper floors at the southwest corner facade, as noted in the image on the screen. The 500 South facade, which I'd actually just like to make a clarification, is not 298 feet. We do have a drawing. 298 feet is the entire length of our property. Our building is 271 feet, just as a clarification. The 500 South facade features a mural above the main entrance to better separate the two larger masses on either side. The large windows mentioned above wrap around wrap around the corner and cover the upper levels of the west section of the facade, shrinking the perceived width of that elevation. Our 500 South facade is very similar in nature to the recently approved Station 424 development's 700 East facade, which both includes larger masses being broken up by courtyards. Additionally, the length of the facade fits within the historical context of the block, with historical brick buildings including Trolley Square, Trolley Corners, and several other buildings within sight. Some examples which our team went out and measured with a tape wheel include Liberty Boulevard, which is across the street to the east, which is 670 feet long, unbroken. Trolley Corners, which faces 700 East, its facade is 222 feet. The Trolley Square Whole Foods building that faces 700 East is 318 feet. The 500 and south facing facade is 225 feet. The retail building portion of Trolley Square that is west of Whole Foods on 500 South is 295 feet long. And the large mall building that's part of Trolley Square that faces 700 East is 296 feet long, and the 600 South, street-facing facade is 468 feet long. Trader Joe's, because they are also within immediate proximity, its 400 South facing facade is 332 feet, and its Green Street facade is 225 feet. The 700 East facade differs substantially from the previous design. Like the southwest corner of the building, the plan shows a new wall of glass covering the upper floors of the building's northeast corner. The revisions also include an additional step back at the northeast corner, as discussed earlier, creating a patio space above the retail space. The revised plans also have increased the north building setback from the adjacent property line. This increased setback reduces the overall width of the 700 East street-facing facade to 198 feet 3 inches. Regarding site layout, our setback from 700 East. While the revisions made have satisfied the city staff regarding the modification, actually there is no modification on 700 East, our setback of building, its articulation of the building, 50% of the building is at the property line, and 50% of the building steps back between 10 and 15 feet, which is noted here on the 50% southern portion of the 700 East facade. A diagram has been provided illustrating that the proposed setback from 700 East is not substantially different from the approved setback. I should clarify, a diagram within the package has been provided illustrating that the proposed setback from 700 East is not substantially different from the approved setback from the recently approved Station 424 development. To mitigate impacts on the Malloy building, the updated plan includes significant changes, as previously discussed, to the northeast corner of the building. The floors above the podium have been stepped back, significantly more glazing added to the upper floors, and openings on the ground floor wrap around to the north facade. As another point of reference, And in comparison, the recently approved Station 424 development's 700 East street-facing facade, according to their streetscape study, at the corner adjacent to the Malloy building, rises 40 feet before it steps back only 5 feet 3 inches. Our building steps back above our podium at 27 feet high, which is consistent with the scale of the Malloy building, which is approximately 27 feet to the top of the roof, and then we step back 15 feet above that podium. As Aaron mentioned earlier, the utility box that was shown on the 700 East elevation is now eliminated. The ventilation box for the garage is now moved to a different location. The door spacing, as Aaron also mentioned, the revised plans propose more doors and openings than the initial plan. Ground floor residential units along the south and west facades are now accessible. Are now accessible through the exterior entries. The plan also adds more entries to the leasing office, which is at the southeast corner, and retail uses at the northeast corner. While not every entry is exactly within 40 feet, the revisions show a significant improvement and only exceed 40 feet in 2 locations. The average door spacing between existing entries along the south and west facades are well below 40 feet required. To address the increasing in spacing in 2 locations, the revisions include additional glazing and larger recesses to maintain safe pedestrian access. As noted early, one of the 700 East door spacing that's greater than 40 feet was specifically avoided due to the interior and exterior grading of 3 to 4 feet between interior and outside. While doors and ramps, can be included, we felt and city staff agreed that the experience in the public plaza would be diminished if a ramp was taking up the space. We have significant ramps inside our clubhouse and leasing office space on the interior of the building to be able to accommodate the additional doors that were added on the 500 South facade. And I mentioned this while doors are possible. I know at our last meeting, grading was a poor answer without detail behind it. And now that we're at 2 locations, that if the commission finds it absolutely necessary to have doors in those 2 locations, considering the fact that we feel like it would have a negative impact on the public experience, we would be happy to include that as a condition to our approval. Regarding materials, as Aaron stated, panel size and articulation, the revised plans do clarify the size of each panel. In addition to improvements in the detail of elevations and renderings, the plan also includes architectural details illustrating how materials are articulated, how the depth and texture changes between each material. The provided diagrams help to visualize the overall texture of the proposed development and how it relates to and is complementary to nearby buildings in the district, existing and proposed. Warranty details have also been provided. Our submittal includes details about the 20-year warranty for the metal panel to comply with Section 21A 37050B2 that lists permitted materials for new development in the TSA district. The proposed materials will be durable in nature and are compatible with other materials found in other projects within the districts. A few other items to note, which is sort of a recap, is a streetscape study is now provided that meets the application requirements and includes Trolley Square. Floor plans are included showing how ground floor uses interact with the exterior features in the public right-of-way. Changes in design that would help buffer the proposed building from adjacent properties. Redesign of street-facing facades to help reduce the perceived size of the building. Reduce the mass by reduced parking. Entries to ground floor residential units along Green Street and 500 South that are designed to interact with the public realm. Set back the building from the Malloy property. Remove the parking garage ventilation box in front of the building on 700 East. Included additional details about the proposed materials, including the panel size, material articulation, and the depth of the material modulations, i.e. the point of change. I bring these up because these are all specific comments either by the commission at our January hearing or provided by the city. These are all now included and addressed in our package. In closing, with the revisions that have been made, we believe we have not only met the requests of the commission and the city planning staff, but we are confident we've met the requirements and standards of the city zoning ordinance and new construction standards. We are respectfully requesting the same consideration and treatment that was given to the recently approved Station 424 development, as our proposed buildings are substantially similar. With that, we are asking that this commission consider the same items that are within the purview of the commission and items that fall under the city zoning ordinances, the same way as the commission concluded with the recently approved Station 424 application. We also understand from previous commission hearings, specifically the December 22, when Station 424 was heard and approved, that city staff and multiple commissioners mentioned, and paraphrasing, that historic context along 700 East has been lost and only one historic item remains. The character of the neighborhood has changed, but we want to ensure that property owners have every right to express their comments and have the opportunity to remain despite construction around it. And it was stated that when contractors come in, some people have had good experiences that contractors will do their diligence and work with the historic structures, and some contractors don't. It's worth noting that we have been working with the Murdochs and have already completed a survey of their property, the historic Malloy building, taken photos, and just this morning completed an x-ray of the building. We have also offered to bring our general contractor and structural engineer to discuss concerns and review means and methods of the work that will take place in close proximity to the Malloy property. We appreciate your time this evening, and thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Augustine. Do we have any questions for the applicant or for planning staff at this time?
I've got a question.
Carlton.
So on the north facade now that faces the Malloy house, there's a couple doors that look like for egress stair on that area, which would require egress lighting. How do you propose to minimize the light trespass onto the adjacent property given the proximity of the buildings?
I mean, our architect, Ron, if you want to speak to that, we haven't yet completed that design, but we'll certainly comply with the city's ordinance on lighting.
Yeah, some of the lighting may be taken care of on our landscape plan from lower level lighting, and then of course you can have a wall wash that has a screening, so that way your light source is held to the ground versus, spreading across and into the neighbors' yards.
I have a question, maybe best for Aaron. We've talked a lot about this TSA UNC zoning district, which is the Urban Neighborhood Transit Station District. I'm just curious how, I guess, what the goals of that district are within the city's master plan, and if this project presumably helps meet those goals. So I just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, there is a master plan, an amendment to the Central Community Master Plan that speaks about the track stations along 400 South, really promoting that increase in residential spaces. Really, it's high-density residential at this point, utilizing the transit at those locations. So that's sort of the intent of the TSA district is, this is what was wanted in the master plan, as well as, the district permits this, and that height is permitted through the point system that I discussed in the report for that additional floor of height. So it's a serious goal. I can't really speak to the goals and what was kind of thought about at the time that it was adopted and written, but if Michaela wants to add anything, she...
Yeah, previously there was a TC 75 zoning district along the corridor there, and we weren't getting much development. It was, fast food and drive-throughs, and the city embarked, and I think it was 2012, on a livability project to look at more appropriate zoning, to have high-intensity uses, attractive pedestrian, commercial, mixed use along our transit routes. And so that's replaced that old TC 75 zoning along the corridor there. it stops at Trolley. Trolley is still community shopping, so it'll stop right there, but pretty much between the south facade of this property and to the block north is transit station area along to try to achieve that goal.
Well, piggybacking on that last question, what benefits is the developer getting from being in this TSA zone? You've got an increase in height, right? What other benefits does he get for?
When you say benefits, you mean what is permitted by the district?
Yes.
Or what in addition through certain design elements?
What is permitted in that district, and are they gaining advantages by some of the specific design things they're doing? Like, for example, you earn some points to get some extra height. Where did those points come from?
There are a number of things. Architecture, 360-degree architecture using those high-quality, durable materials. This project, every side has high-quality materials. You see some projects in this district with blank concrete walls along party walls, and they've used brick for the vast majority of this north facade. There's also the amenity space. There are, it's been a minute, but they've met the points for that. There are, I'm blanking, a mix of, they've got a retail element included in here. There is the density in which they're proposing. If you propose a certain amount of density, you're awarded points. They are taking a property that is really non-conforming in the TSA district, the surface parking lot, just the commercial use, and replacing that with the high-density mixed use. That is a benefit. They get points for doing that.
Distance to the tracks.
Yeah, then there's the distance to the track station as well. That's provided. They're within a certain amount of space, with a certain distance, that they are awarded points for that as well.
I see. Are there any things that would lose them points in the district requirements? Like, for example, when zero parking is required and they are providing 327, which I appreciate you've reduced from the 370-something, but still that seems contrary to the goals of being in a transit district. And I understand from your marketing point of view, people are going to have cars, but again, it seems contrary to the intent of the district.
And they did not receive points for the parking.
Do they lose them?
There's no loss of points, but they do. There's only a gain of points if they keep parking down to zero. If you have parking below a certain ratio of 1-to-1 for units, then you get an additional 25 points. In this case, they don't.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And it should be noted, this is I mentioned it in the staff report, the use here isn't multifamily, it's a student housing, rooming boarding house. So the parking, it's per room. We wouldn't calculate, that has nothing to do with zoning, but at least when I'm reviewing this, I'm looking at it and saying, why are there so many parking spaces? That rooming boarding use at least explains it to me, and why they would need so many spaces. I would prefer a project with fewer parking spaces, but it explains why there are so many.
Yeah, perhaps. What about general zoning? Are they asking for any exceptions to the overall zoning? You say height is now complying.
Yeah.
Setbacks are, and in fact, they're
They have
providing greater setbacks than our. Is there anything else that we might note?
So there is that one request for modification. Each street that this building faces has a different requirement for the setbacks. So along 500 South, it needs to be equal to the average setback of the entire block face. So that includes from the Smith's gas station up to the Liberty Square and up, and it meets that. But along Green Street, there's only a minimum. There's only a maximum setback, not a minimum, if that makes sense. They need to have it as close as they can. So Actually, having that 10-foot setback from Green Street requires a modification to accommodate the fire stair access as well as the pedestrian walkway. And then along that north facade between the Malloy Mansion and between the property, they are providing that additional 9 feet, which is not required by the district.
Okay. Thank you. That's all for now.
Any other questions, commissioners? What about the mural? Did we talk about the mural? You said it's not going to be the postcard of the Brigham Young statue looking down Main Street, but
We were provided a contact at the city who I guess deals with art, and we're happy to reach out. We wanted to put something on there just to illustrate there will be a mural, and we grabbed something that had a tie to Salt Lake City State Street. But I've also been a part of a judge group on one of the 2100 South mural projects, and we have lists of things. And I think for us on the mural specifically, it'll be more of a collaboration because it's a large wall. Once the mural goes up, it's going to be somewhat permanent. We'd like to get the right image up there that sort of speaks to the neighborhood and the historical context. So we're open to all ideas on the mural.
Tell me how you think the mural is preferable to some architectural finish on that wall? Or what's the intent of it?
I think the intent is to add, just some art to the project. We typically add art and murals to all of our projects. We're building in, Sugar House, we have a large mural, and we thought that was, a nice way also to, in addition to the large courtyard breakup, just to sort of break up the building and do something different.
Okay, thank you.
Emily.
I'm impressed with the way this maintains the spirit of the existing neighborhood and creates a lot of open space for its, for what it is, and parking, open space and parking at the same time. So I'm pretty impressed with that. As far as, I think it's almost seamless in its, driving past 7th East with the colors and the dimensions of this configuration, I think that it'll be, it'll feel like it belongs there. I would like to see the sign from the Big Daddy sign, which was the ice cream store before that.
Fendels.
That sign's been there, Fendels, forever. And so I actually feel like I'd like to see the sign incorporated into this project somehow.
It will be. We've instructed our demo crew to keep it, store it, and we're going to use it, due to the size of it. We're actually going to restore it back to Fendels. I guess I don't know if we need permission, but the idea is we have the old, photographs of Fendels, and we think that was very interesting and what it was at the property. So we were going to use that as like a piece in our clubhouse, and sort of like every one of our projects, again, another one in Sugar House had railroad ties. We try to incorporate some historical context of what was at the property or properties into the project as an amenity, so it has some tie to the neighborhood. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It is on our mind, and we are doing it.
Amanda.
You mentioned that you've worked with the owners of the Malloy Mansion. Excuse me. Was there anything, and I realize they're in a very difficult position given how the world has moved around them. Were there any requests or considerations that you were not able to accommodate within reason that they had concerns about?
Well, I'd like to defer that to them. I'm sure the Murdochs will speak of it, but the one I know is, the full setback of our building face adjacent to them, pulling it all the way back to effectively where the face of their building is and their setback. That's not something we can do. Our accommodation, which we thought was, reasonable, and the city as well, was, that entire northeast corner of the building, we cut out a 44 by 15 foot section and added glass there to, sort of soften it.
If I may, along that frontage, we also have a pedestrian arcade space that's happening there. So after you do cross into our property, that is all public space. And so whether, you're in that arcade, which protects you from sun, rain, snow, whatever, all the weather conditions, that's a public space that will be open and accessible to all. And then as you're further down south on 700 near the corner, that's again a pedestrian way with an arcade series of columns that also provides more pedestrian public space on the corner, which we think, ties in well with the context and bringing back, an urban block form, but putting pedestrians, in a safe space there at a retail space and a hopefully a lively corner.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to open up the public hearing for this item, and I've got a fair amount of cards here, many of which are deferring their time to one person. So we're going to start with Cindy Cromer, because she's not deferring her time, and we'll go from there.
I'm pleased to hear that the subject of the mural is not Brigham Young's backside in the future, but murals are not characteristic of the Central City neighborhood, and I see no reason to have one here. It's borrowed from other neighborhoods, but it's not typical of this neighborhood. There are two ways to look at the proposal in front of you and the recommendation from staff. One is that with only 2 contributory structures remaining on the same block, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of that kind of thinking going on these days. The developers of Liberty Square Apartments could have gotten more units. The stewards of the Malloy House could have allowed their property to deteriorate and seek delisting. The city has no obligation to support property owners who acted consistently with the standards for historic preservation in the past. A second way of looking at the proposal is that the focus on the block and the transit corridor is misplaced. The focus here should be on the standalone historic district for Trolley Square, rescued from the Californians who went bankrupt, and less than optimal practices such as sandblasting. Trolley Square consists of 2-story trolley barns running east to west on the block. I do not see the length of the proposed trolley north as so horribly out of scale as the height and the inadequate stepbacks next to the Malloy House, Liberty Square Apartments, and most importantly, the entire block of structures known as Trolley Square. While Ensign Floral and Malloy House represent the architectural diversity of the Central City Historic District, anyone would have to say that the most important historic resources are on the Trolley Square block in terms of cultural history, integrity, and sheer number of contributory structures. In the Dropbox, at the last minute, as usual, I've looked at the standards where I think if you focus on the Trolley Square block, you come up with a different conclusion than the staff did. I will also say that there have been numerous references to Station 424, which is on the north side of the Malloy House, and I pointedly suggested in a comment last year that you came up short on that decision. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. I have 10 comment cards deferring to Danelle Murdoch. So Danelle, you are next up. I don't know if we're going to give you a full 20 minutes. Okay.
But I appreciate that. May I sit up here? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I brought 2 visuals. Wow, this is, thank you. I did submit my comments to Aaron. They should have been submitted when he submitted to you. I do have some major concerns. My name is Danelle Murdoch, property owner of the historic Hancock Malloy Mansion. My husband's sitting next to me. I'd like to thank you for tabling the originally submitted plans of Trolley North earlier this year. Your willingness to maintain a sense of human scale, limitation of massing, and city streetscape is greatly appreciated. Thank you, Alta-Terra, for giving a 9'8" setback on the north side of Trolley North and a 12-foot and approximately 44-foot wide step back on floors 4 through 8 on the front side of 700 East. These are minimum offerings that are appreciated. Thank you to Aaron Barlow, Michael Augustine, Craig Zogby, and Zach Clegg for their time in helping review the new Trolley North plans. Once again, I beg the Historic Landmark Commission, gosh dang it, sorry, not to approve the proposed plans of Trolley North and to continue to defend the historic Hancock Malloy Mansion from not having an adjacent frontage to the entire east side of Trolley North, and not requiring us a 30-foot ground level look around or any level within the historic Hancock Mansion to push for less of an unrealistic discrepancy in mass height and setback, and to once again use the power the commission has to not allow the historic Malloy Hancock Mansion to continue to be challenged so severely by its existing 30-foot setback within an extruding alley by Trolley North building its mast to the 700 East property line next to us. This has been a conscious, applied encroachment and street change by Salt Lake City officials in the state of Utah for a long time. As you know, in 1957, State Route made 7th East a non-charming neighborhood and made it a highway. It took out 20 feet grass verges and 25 feet beautification strips with trees. This is what Hancock Mansion bought into. It didn't buy into this, and it didn't build a structure or a support base foundation to withstand what's going to happen around us. My question to you is, why are we imposed with financial burden of securing our foundation to 2 massive buildings which we have no control over? That's why I use the word beg. As you know, Fendel's Ice Cream, when it was built in 1957, was the first breach of the historic setbacks to the property line, and it was allowed to sit 9 feet 3 inches from 700 East. The MacArthur House was allowed to build 8 feet 8 inches from 700 East. The non-constructed in-paper situation that is 424, it is approved, but it's not there yet, is 10 feet from 700 East. The 424 also has a full 10-foot setback around its entire structure, everywhere. This today, Altiterra asks for no setback on 700 East, and Aaron didn't clarify the setback required on 700 East. He skipped it. What is the contextual setback of 700 East? Right now, if you approve this, you will be approving the first building along 700 East in this historic district, and I have traveled the entire length with no setback on 700 East. Is that a precedence you want to start? Because that's what's going to happen. These massive buildings with transit backing will change our city. Why is there not a contextual setback along 700 East next to the Malloy Mansion? Why is the property not flipped and this beautiful plaza they're raving about not next to the Hancock Malloy Mansion? But don't be fooled by the plaza, because it's not very far set back. It's maybe a 12-foot 5-inch setback. It's not listed on their plans. How much building bullying and government condoned encroachment must the historic Hancock Malloy Mansion endure, as it has withheld its position since 1890 and is considered historically contributing? Why are the 700 East property existing constructed contextual building setbacks being dismissed and or ignored by Trolley North on 700 East? When they talked about the houses before and not being able to potentially see what goes back and beyond, our building will not be seen. As you go to the corner of 4th South and 5th South across 7th East and look west, you will not even be able to see our house. You won't. We will be in an alleyway. Why can't Trolley North set back in context with historic Hancock Mansion of 30 feet, and for 70 feet to 100 feet running north-south allow their building? Oh, I just said that, I'm sorry. Why is Trolley North able to build out further than the existing currently constructed setbacks of both the Xerox building at 19.5 feet and Big Daddy's Pizza of 9 feet 2 inches? Why has the decision to keep the building's column to the edge of the sidewalk not considered hazardous to the drivers southbound on 700 East going 40 miles an hour on what is considered a state highway? And pedestrians with obstructive views and turnouts. This still remains, as beautiful as the building is. I'm excited about the beauty of their building. However, I'm not excited to look out my window straight up at 80 feet. That does not step back further on our north side where they have no obligation. How will Trolley North be constructed on its 700 East side without closing the sidewalks and blocking pedestrian traffic for expansive lengths of time, as it will take a couple years to construct? How do we even walk out from our house and walk to Whole Foods? On the other side, how do we walk out of our house and walk to the gas station or to Trader Joe's? Our only option is to walk out into 7th East until some sort of New York-style barrier is built with a walkway. Why is there a full 10-foot setback on the sidewalk with no obstructions or columns on the quiet Green Street and not on the busier 700 East? Why is it acceptable to place 5-foot square columns in the way of pedestrians on 700 East? This is going to be a foot traffic area. The sidewalk is 6 foot 5 inches. The area between their arcade is 5 feet 5 inches. It's a full foot less than a 6-foot sidewalk. So this isn't a wide space we're talking about. If the Historic Landmark Committee approves this building plan, won't it be setting a new precedence? I mentioned this before, for larger buildings to have the option to build directly on any given street-facing property line. The historic Hancock Malloy Mansion continues to see light and solar access as being an issue from Trolley North. In the Historic Landmark Commission meeting in December, it was mentioned there's no laws, and we've already discussed in past meetings how absolutely disappointing and disheartening this is. I did bring a light study. Their light study very lightly grays what the shade is, so when you look at it, it looks like we get sun most of the time. And I know this is difficult to see, but on the top is spring, and in spring at 9 a.m. on the far left corner, I know it's hard for you, Carlton, I'm sorry, we get full sun on the top of the house. By the time it's noon, there's not even a quarter of the house in sun, and that sun doesn't come through any of our windows. We will get that sun through reflection on 424 after that. That's spring, all the top row. Summer, we will have sun through June and July. Thank heavens. Autumn, same thing as spring. We're only going to have 2 months, barely 2 months of sun. So any setback, any step back means maybe another day of sun for our building, another 2 hours in the day of sun for our building. Anything, I don't know if you've ever sat in a building that is 15 to 20 feet away that has a wall of bricks straight up 80 feet. It doesn't matter if there's a disseminating pattern to reflect your eye, you're still looking out at a wall. Sorry. Let's see. In the plans, I noted, and they fixed, which is nice, that they offered the shadow study up, and they fixed their landscape plan, which is great. But what about the zoning plan? In the case of their zoning, it says they meet it by meeting the average setback of the street of 700 East. We just talked about this, but wouldn't the average setback be between 55 feet 11 inches, which is Modern Display, and 8 feet 8 inches, which is MacArthur House? Putting it 20 feet back, that would be the average setback. I mean, and the other thing that it says is it also talks about in the design guidelines, it speaks to the idea of these being constructed buildings, constructed existing buildings, and all we've heard is 424 got this and 424 got that, and it's unfortunate what 424 got. We did not know what to say to you with 424. I was working in Los Angeles on 424. My husband sat here frustrated, no city help, no information, and 424 was passed. And it was passed because it was passed before when there was a driveway next to the MacArthur House. This put a wall straight up against our property. On scale of design, I beg the Historic Landmark Commission to see that the 5th southwest-facing mass of Trolley North is currently 213 feet. They talked about the 271 feet. They still, again, other people have done it. That's great. Why do multiple poor decisions make a right? Why does greed win the day? Why does Trolley North continue to need 327 parking stalls when there are none required? They could use that space to put some of this housing. They could add some step backs further up and let the mass go back. There's so many things that could happen with this building. Trolley North has been given the bonus points. Why aren't I not taking advantage of the full 85 feet and building more than the 7 feet above the podium build? Because it would cost more money, of course, so we're going to build out as wide as we can with the lesser materials. Again, I thank Trolley North for the 9-foot 8-inch setback on the north side, but what I am going to say to you is that is a tit-for-tat move. That is what was built 130 years ago by a homeowner who had no foresight to what this would be. Scale and design. Please remember that Trolley North is a transit-oriented development and has received many benefits because of this. They've given up 55 parking spaces and 0 housing units. Their plan still has 382 stalls. Oh, excuse me, I think that's incorrect. Plan for a building that requires none. I think it's 327. Could the space be better used? Why are the residents of both Green Street and the Hancock-Malloy Mansion still asked to look straight up 81 feet walls? Why does Trolley North continue to need 2 parking spaces for every student's housing building unit? Why does Trolley North believe by offering a color-shifting brick that eases this behemoth structure when you're standing right next to it? I continue to ask the Historic Landmark Commission to help us hold these developers accountable no matter the plans approved. When Trolley North's developers or architects are asked questions that they don't know how to change the plans, they won't say this because they do know how to change the plans, and we've talked about that. But they may say it's a monumental task, it's overwhelming, it could be a financial burden. But what they bring you today is a piece of paper. It is not real until it's built, and these plans can be changed. And you can take action today. There are several things that have been set out that seem to be against zoning. Again, what is the 700 East zone setback? Why hasn't this been addressed multiple times, and why would this be the first building to build out to it? I thank you for your time. I thank you for allowing us to sit here, and I appreciate what graciousness you give us.
Thank you.
Can I say one moment, or
Mr. Chair, they consolidated. It's been
He didn't
a long time.
consolidate his time.
Okay, great then. Then he can have 2 minutes.
Any other public comments that have not yielded their time already? Oh, yeah, we have 2 cards that do not wish to speak. Do I read those into the record? Okay. All right, we got 2 cards. First one from Zach Clegg in opposition to the project Trolley North. Quote, "The 2 developments planned to surround the historic Malloy Mansion represent, in my mind, no compromise in regards to their historic settings in a historic district. The scale is off, setbacks are nothing but greedy and are not contextual. I understand the need for new residences/density, however, at what expense? The Trolley North development is a perfect opportunity for a large unit building to find a solution that highlights its relationship to the Malloy Mansion and not bury it. I challenge the HLC to look at National Park Service guidance for construction in a historic context. This proposed design is not it." And then from Anna Foster, in opposition to the project, "With a location directly next to a historic building, the massing, scale, and architectural features are most critical to be compatible and maintain the historic quality of the existing streetscape. The proposed development will not preserve the unique and historical quality of the neighborhood to the north." Okay, thanks for all the public comments. Next, we have a opportunity for the applicant and planning staff to come back up and address any comments.
Let me go first? Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the HLC, my name is Bruce Beard. I'm counsel for the project. I'm going to be extraordinarily brief. I'm going to discuss only 5 issues, and on several of them, we're actually going to, a couple of them we're going to at least agree with the mansion. We are perfectly willing to have a condition of the approval that we comply with all applicable rules regarding the construction stability related to the property next door, and doing what is required by law and best practices to ensure that to the maximum extent possible, construction of Trolley North has absolutely no impact. That's why we've taken all these detailed responses to make sure it works, and we're perfectly willing to continue to do that. Second question regarding physical access to the property during construction of this building, and for that matter, Station 424. Both UDOT and the city have dealt with street closure issues for construction of new buildings thousands, literally thousands of times. Both of those entities have rules and regulations for how you deal with it on an interim basis. And again, we're perfectly willing to have a condition imposed on the approval of complying with those legal requirements. Absolutely no issue regarding that. The second issue, the third issue, is the 7th East setbacks. I would suggest that the question that was raised by the Malloy Mansion of where did those setback requirements come from is relatively simply answered. The City Council made that decision as a matter of policy when it adopted the new GSA zone that's applicable to this property. We're not asking you to set any different precedent than what the City Council specifically said was okay. So that's that. Concerning the statements about how horrible this might be to Liberty Square and Trolley Square, I note for the record that neither Liberty Square nor Trolley Square has any opposition here on the record to this proposal. I'm going to assume that both of those entities, since they are smart and got notice of this project, if they had any disagreements with this project, they would have raised those disagreements here to you. They did not. Therefore, I suggest that the concerns expressed allegedly on their behalf are without merit. Finally, the last issue regarding light and air, I believe, if I read in the newspaper right, that about a year or so ago, the city actually litigated a light and air challenge regarding the apartments next to the Masonic Temple, where the people next door to those apartments claimed the essential same claims here, that the building of those apartments would materially impact their access to light and air, and I'm assuming that's visibility, et cetera. That was litigated through an appeals officer, if I remember correctly, and I believe it went to district court, and I believe that the district court sided with the city's position that there was no such easement for light and air. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think that I am. So we believe that those address the primary legal issues. I think staff did an excellent job in its analysis. Mike is going to talk about a few others, I think parking and maybe one others, but I did want to talk about one thing. Sometimes when people are opposing a project, they just toss off a comment and hope nobody notices. In this case, the comment was that the project is being built with, I think the word was, quote, lesser materials, close quote. That is simply not the case. The architect here is designing this with the highest end materials that are reasonably built, reasonably usable. We have a pallet. We could get a pallet if we needed to, but you've seen them specified. The architect is here to explain the quality. The city has seen the quality. This is a high quality, four-sided architectural project which has, as far as I can tell, a total of one opponent who owns a historical building that you'll see for approximately 5 seconds as you're driving down 7th East at speed.
Yeah, I'd like to address just a couple of items. One of them is parking, and while the TSA zone does allow for a minimum of 0 parking, it also permits, in our case, a maximum of around 570 to 580 parking spaces. So, while we appreciate and, hopefully one day we get to a point, where parking is, can be reduced to 0 in most locations, our proposal in building, as Aaron mentioned earlier, as student housing will house about 613 students. So providing about 50% parking, is far less than, 1-to-1 and is just a necessary accommodation. And the other comment I had was, having our columns up to our almost up to our property line along 700 East, that is the case for about 50% of the building, but the other 50% is set back between 10 and 12 or 15 feet, but at least 10 feet. And the columns that are up to our property line, which is permitted by zoning, is still 12 feet from the back of the curb and the roadway. So the comment about, how it would affect, vehicular traffic, I just wanted to respond to let you know there's another 12-foot buffer to the roadway. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to just apologize if I skipped over the 700 East setback requirements. I've got them pulled up right here. It's not listed as a number of streets in the TSA zoning district, but it is among all other streets, and at least 50% of the street-facing building facades shall be within 5 feet of the front or corner side yard property lines.
So is the front 500 South or 7th East? It's 7th East, I guess, right? Because
this is for both front and corner side yards, so
okay,
so
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's all. We can call this a corner side yard. It's addressed on 500 South.
Yeah,
but the standard is still at least 50% of the street-facing building facades shall be within 5 feet of that front corner side property line, and this proposal meets that standard. The standards promote that close to the development close to the property line.
Why is that? Not to put you on the spot.
It was.
That's what the city council adopted.
I presume it's for pedestrian.
Yeah, for pedestrian-oriented development, keeping to avoid
That
shopping
ground
centers
floor.
with parking between the
Ground floor
pedestrian.
activation.
Okay, excellent. If there's nothing else, we're going to close the public hearing and go into executive session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, pretty high stakes here, obviously, and it feels like we're caught in between two pretty strong and in some ways competing visions for this district and for the city more broadly. In other ways, these can be very complementary to each other. I think the need for housing is apparent to anyone who's lived in Salt Lake for more than a couple months. And a central city is typically where that would be desired. And placing it near transit is a pretty progressive idea that I think would also be desired. But it is obviously a historic district with not a lot of in-period development of this scale. Trolley Square itself is moderately large, but definitely not as tall or voluminous. So yeah, that's, I think, what we got to talk about.
Are there standards that aren't met, maybe could be a starting point?
Are there any standards that we do not feel are being met? I mean, for one, I think the materiality is good. They're durable materials. There's no stucco, which is good to see. They're metal panels, and then personally, I think the brick at the level of the sidewalk is nice. I mean, that's contextual, and it's a good pedestrian scale. And I like what it's doing to Green Street. But yeah, do we feel like standards are not met?
Well, I think the problem here is that I think the standards are being met, as is the zoning requirements, except for that 213-foot facade versus 200. Everything else seems to be complying, but the building's just too damn big, and it just doesn't quite feel right. I keep harping on the parking, and the developer has, a rationale for why he's giving as much as he does, but I think that's a little bit archaic. Students going to most universities don't necessarily expect to have parking. A way of reducing mass, yet giving the income of keeping that many dwelling units, reduce the amount of parking, which kind of drives what happens above. But I don't know where we have any teeth to push that. But I'd like to see the building mass reduced to some extent, which is a competing interest with trying to get density and housing, which is necessary too. So this is a tough one. I'm sympathetic to the neighbors who feel like they're getting boxed in, yet this zone and what has been put into place in terms of zoning requirements, it's forced this to happen. I'm not coming up with a solution here, just kind of rambling on my feelings on this. I'd like to find a way to encourage the developer to reduce the mass to some extent, but I don't know that we have much teeth to do that.
Kenton, I agree with you in your comments, in that the city council has given the blessing for these zoning requirements, and they have wanted to encourage the density in this TSA zone. And to me, and I believe that, Michael, you and I have had a conversation previously about students and their cars and how students, they're going to want their cars. On the other hand, we're trying to be progressive and have these TSA zones and focus more on the use of mass transportation. So, yeah, I struggle with the number of parking spaces in the building as well. If there weren't that many parking spaces, could something else be done then to modify the mass? Could there be something to give the mansion a little more daylight, a few more days of the year if fewer parking spaces resulted in a modification of the structure? So, but I think as far as what we've been given in terms of standards, it's tough to argue otherwise that it doesn't fit within what they've been given, what the developers have been given to work with.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just make a statement that they are meeting the parking requirements. And I just really want to emphasize that we stick to the preservation standards here. Are they met? Are they not met? We don't have authority to change up their parking mix as the Landmark Commission.
Well, I understand that, but I think it's tied in. It does drive preservation interests, even though I know they're complying. They're complying with just about every bit of zoning. You know, we just got to see how that affects, excuse me, the preservation interests. But your point is taken.
Just a few comments. Just in terms of parking. If there were too few cars, there would be a lot of other cars parked at Trader Joe's, at the gas station, on the street, at Trolley Square, because they're there. In designing comparable residential units, you know, the numbers of, you know, 0.85 to 1 to unit, sometimes it's not quite right, or not quite accurate in terms of, you know, it may be a 2-bedroom, so that's 2 cars. Maybe it's just 1 car, but, you know, so those numbers are always, and there's latitude, and, you know, if I understand the zoning correctly, it could be as little as 0 and as many as 500. So the number is somewhere, you know, somewhere in between. It's a little bit higher than half. So it meets the requirements. You know, it could be this, it could be that, but it's right in the middle. I understand just a comment. I understand the foundation concerns, you know, of a 1957 historic building. I would assume that the general contractor, you know, typically they would survey existing buildings that they're going to be building around to say this is what it was when we started and this is what it is at the end, and I suspect that'll be a part of the construction. You know, Kenton, it's a big building. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's a big building, but there's quite a bit of articulation, particularly down low, where you're going to see it from cars. It's a little bit less as you go, you know, up the building. When the applicant was here previously, we asked a lot of them, and from what I can see is they've made a number of changes. You know, could there have been more changes? Probably, but you know, they've done the streetscape study. There was a shade study, and there's no doubt that this building is going to be, or not this building, but the historic home is going to be in shade. I think the plan accuracy was questioned, and I think the new rendering shows it appropriately. There's been a lot of changes, and I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm not going to comment on the mural. You know, that's a part of the work. It's just so. I mean, those are the comments that I had. You know, concerning. I keep hearing the term contextual setback. Setbacks are set by zoning, and has the zoning changed from, 100 years ago, 50 years ago? It has. And so what was appropriate, 100 years ago, 50 years ago is not any longer. It's just different. That was an argument and a fight at zoning, not Landmark Commission. So, I am curious about access to Trader Joe's and the gas station. Gas station I'm not too concerned about because you're going to drive there. That is a good question to me. How do you access Trader Joe's? Do you have to go around the block, or is there a way, if you live there, to go west as opposed to south, west, north, and then, it's a good question, and it's something that the applicant might think about for their residents. Those would be my comments.
Emily.
So what I find to be in opposition, contrary goals, at the same time is we want to make a walkable, transit-friendly, dense, livable place. But we can't build that on the sidewalk. Because if you want us to walk, then, having not enough room between the road and the building is taking, that's public space, and there just isn't enough of it to allow for the kind of traffic that we want to see in the future and the safety that we need always. And so I do take issue with the setback being so close to the road. And I think that that's everybody's space.
I think, what was the actual dimension from the curb back to the face of the columns that are closest to the
It's
7th East?
12 feet.
Yeah, so
I can find a dimensioned drawing for you.
is that 12 feet of paved sidewalk, or is there
The
a plant
plans,
strip?
they include an improvement of the sidewalk in front of the properties.
But really, there's 12 feet clear from curb to the face of their columns, then the width of the columns, and then another 5 feet to the building?
Yes, let me pull up a,
I'm getting some head shakes from the
Unit gallery.
audience. See if we can get those.
okay. We've got a couple things, and maybe the architect for the project, if you have questions, if it's that he may have a better
Yeah,
idea.
please. Can we ask for clarification from the applicant on this? Is that legal?
It's the chair's discretion whether to invite them back.
Yeah, if it's just a factual question with an answer.
Yeah, just
then yes.
be curious to know the actual
No
dimensions there.
editorializing.
If you go to the overall ground floor plan, I'm going to show it as well.
Sorry.
Level 1.
Level 1. And go over here.
Yeah, so on the north side of it, the property, we are pulled about 6 inches off the property. The property itself, back of curb, I think we're 12 feet or so from the back of curb to the property line itself, which is equal to what Station 424 has to the north of it, because again, they're 5 feet held off, but that 5 feet is a retaining wall and non-usable space, where ours is usable space at that point. And then as you head further south, this flares open halfway through the block, again, to comply with zoning. We're opening up a plaza, so we do hold within 5 feet of the building on the north side. And then as you head further south, this flares open to about, I think it's 12, 13 feet from the property line but that's like 25 feet of open space from the back of curb. So it's more open space than what the Xerox building had, and it should be more usable space as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other discussion? Carlton, what do you think?
I think it's a tight spot. I'm sympathetic to the mansion. Clearly, it's unfortunate the situation that they're in that particular block. I will repeat my view that in this particular case, it's difficult to have that one remaining building drive the development for the entire surrounding space. If we apply that standard throughout the city, it's going to be virtually impossible to develop nearly anything. This is the challenge that we run into all the time, particularly in these situations where there is a little nugget of history that is valuable and needs to be preserved, but it's not surrounded by other little nuggets that create a neighborhood. I was the one that I think was referenced before when discussing about the historical context of the block and this particular area, and other than this particular building, that is essentially gone, other than Trolley Square nearby, which is a preserved block. I wish it was different and the situation was different, but practically speaking, I don't think that that alone can be the determinant here. I do think that they have made certain concessions that help the situation. We don't have a blank wall, as was shown in some of the original renderings, that's 9 feet away from the building. There is green space. There is some opening that recognizes that there is a building here that should be preserved and recognized, even though it is further set back, and due to the setbacks that the city currently has in this district, it will be much further back from the curb than the existing buildings and to some degree hidden. But on the whole, it's difficult for me to find a rationale within the constraints that we have on us as a historic landmark commission to make significant changes to what they've shown. I do have some concerns still about light trespass on that side, especially since they're going to have egress lighting on the north side of the building with the egress stair. I do have some concerns with regard to the property management company's consistency in maintaining the green facade that they are proposing on that north side as a tempering measure to the adjacent property. If that's allowed to die and not be maintained, then it defeats the purpose. It is not ideal, but it is certainly better than what we looked at a few months ago.
I know that this is the last of its kind on the block, and that makes it even more precious to me. There's a couple blocks that have similar little canyons of what it used to be, and I really value those personally for what kind of scale that it creates. And scale is my problem with this design. And I don't know that we do have if that is our business, but they're using more space than their fair share, and I don't think it's safe. And I do think we are a community that's changing rapidly, and 7th East the changes are hard to watch, really, and they've been coming for a long time, and I don't know that we can avoid the changes that are ahead of us, but I do think that they need to be conscientious of public safety, and yeah, there's a lot of instances lately that things are being built right on top of the sidewalk, all along 13th South. I mean, it's unsightly, it's unsafe, and whichever trumps what, it is this Central City Historic District, and I just think that we need to make it, if we're trying to create a walkable thing here, then I don't think that that's being done with, expecting all of the pedestrian and bicycle traffic to negotiate on postage stamp sides of piece of sidewalk. I don't think that that meets anyone's needs. That's all.
Amanda, you good? Trying to avoid it.
No, I'm not trying to avoid. I just, it's a frustrating situation because, as Michaela has reminded us, we have constraints here, and if the city council has approved these zoning guidelines in these districts, then, we are bound by those. Trying to be progressive, trying to have a more walkable city, using mass transportation. I appreciate the fact that so much has been done from so many changes and modifications have been made since January. It's a completely different project in my mind. I was not the biggest fan of 424. However, there are constraints that we have to work within, and if this is how our city leaders if this is the future that our city leaders have chosen for us in terms of these guidelines, then we have to, if we don't like those, then we can go back and argue that case in a separate venue. But for here and now, progress is on top of us, and I do think that an incredible amount of effort and modifications and concessions have been addressed in the changes that I've seen. So, and knowing that many of those didn't have to be made, I do appreciate that they were.
Yeah, one more thought. Perhaps as a way to ameliorate the problem a little bit, the developer could offer to move the mansion from this location to a more compatible setting, buy them out, move it, and put it on a lot somewhere else. And then you could do whatever you wanted on that additional piece of land.
That's not the proposal, unfortunately, that we have in front of us tonight.
Any other comments? I tend to agree with Amanda. I think everyone at this desk really cares about our city's architectural history, or else we wouldn't be on the Historic Landmark Commission. But there's only so much we can do for projects that are outside of the boundaries of a project that we're considering. And the zoning changes were decided at the city council level, and those are what they are. So, in my opinion, the project meets our standards as the Historic Landmark Commission. Our zoning overlay, the H overlay district that we do, we are supposed to administer. If anyone thinks differently, now's kind of the time to speak up, but otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Can I add one more thought? We have discussed the city zoning regulations and what the city council has directed, and that's fine. Obviously, they've applied a standard to certain areas of the city for certain reasons, and there's a rationale for that should be adhered to. That said, I don't want to leave the impression that the Landmark Commission is looking at this and saying exclusively, well, the city council said this and therefore we should proceed accordingly. Rather, we need to use our judgment as the commission, case by case and location by location, to determine whether something is appropriate in the context of that area. And my point earlier is that if this was being built on a corner where the rest of the block was historic houses, I think we would take a very different view of that, because clearly there is a discontinuity between the historical context and what is being proposed. But in this particular location, this is where we run into the hard decision of there is no other context. And I don't think that we are in a position reasonably to place unusual conditions on this particular building and this structure with one contributing property adjacent to it and no other context on that block. So, yeah, the city council has said that, and yes, we should take that into account, but I don't think that alone is the driving decision here for the commission.
Oh, John, just a comment, and along with what Carlton just said, I think we're all on this commission because, of our love of historic structures and wanting to maintain that fabric in our city. I think the bright spot, if we look at it, is that along this, this stretch from 500 to 600 south, there's a remnant of what used to be, and I'm glad that the building is still there, and it's a remembrance of what it used to be. I think there's a lot of other examples in the city, unfortunately, but at least I'm happy that the mansion is there. I think as you're walking, and I've walked it, I've biked it, and I've driven it, and they're three completely different experiences. And I think as you walk it, this is a visual respite along that path as you're walking from south to north. So I agree with everything else that has been said. This is a zoning issue. They've satisfied the zoning. I wish things were different, but it's not in our purview.
Agreed.
Carlton, were you going to make a motion?
I hadn't planned on it, but I guess I will. Consistent with staff recommendations, so I would make the motion to approve the staff recommended conditions. Based on the information presented and discussed, I move that the commission approve this application based on staff's recommendation, which includes the following conditions. Final review of the plans is delegated to staff. In addition to showing compliance with zoning regulations not modified through this request, the plans shall show compliance with new construction standards, particularly C3 lighting.
Do we have a second?
I would offer a slight amendment to your motion, Carlton, because I too am a little bit concerned about the maintenance of ivy on the north face of the building, and would propose that an alternate columnar tree or something to that effect. I'm not certain that ivy is going to provide a visual 15 feet away from the property line. That might be something that I think, I know the applicant was looking to provide a visual break there, and I appreciate that. I'm not certain that ivy would do that on the north face of the building.
May I ask a question?
I'm having a really hard time over here hearing. We have this giant fan behind us, so if I'm making these strange faces, can you clarify what you just said, Mike? I'm sorry.
I can't hear you with the fans.
It's really hard, folks. The acoustics in this room. You have to eat this microphone. So Carlton has a motion.
Oh, yeah, if I may. So I made a motion based on the motion sheet. I think if I interpret Mike's comment or question correctly, is whether I'd be willing to amend that motion with some verbiage that would strongly recommend or encourage a different planting other than the ivy on the north side of that in order to help ensure longevity of the the visual obstruction. in
That's
that.
correct.
And I don't know that we can require that, but I would certainly be amenable to strongly encouraging it.
That's fair.
All right. Yes, I would amend
That's
that
fair.
by
That could be
adding
a detail, pardon, that could be a detail that we could work
Yeah.
with the.
So I would continue with the previous motion, but I would amend that by adding a second condition for staff review, and that we strongly recommend a different landscaping approach on the north side that would incorporate some sort of columnar tree or something other that would be more resistant or hardy, yes, thank you, than the proposed ivy on the north side of the building.
So based on Carlton's slight amendment, I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Carlton, seconded by Mike. Kenton?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Carlton?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Emily? And I am an aye. That passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone, for coming in.
There's one more.
We do have a third item.
We do?
Yes.
Yeah, we have that. We also have food, and I know that there may be some blood sugar issues. And that's up to you, Mr. Chair, if you would like us to put that out or take like a 5 or 10 minute break here for us to get some sugar in the veins. It's
All
up
right.
to you.
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break before agenda item number 3. more than 5 minutes, but. So next on the agenda, we have Trolley North Wireless Communication Facility at approximately 675 East, 500 South, AKA the same address as the last item.
I don't want to be hunched over the whole time, so I'm going to move the microphone closer to me. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your patience. This is a related request to what you just reviewed. On top of the Sitla building, there is there's a cellular wireless telecommunication facility on the top of the Sitla building. And between demolition of that building and completion of the Trolley North development, there needs to be a place for those cell tower antennas to sit and continue the same level of service between that time. And so what has been proposed before you is the option that staff has worked with the applicant and with the cell providers. This proposal is for a 26.5-foot tall roof-mounted cellular antenna, and staff is recommending approval with the conditions in the staff report. So just an idea of what's going on. The temporary tower location would be sitting on a stair tower that is part of this proposal, part of the Trolley North proposal, as a temporary facility, as an interim facility in between demolition and construction. So here are the plans, sort of showing what's going on. This stair tower, this cast-in-place concrete, would eventually be incorporated into the Trolley North development. It's part of that building, and yeah, so they're utilizing a structure that will be part of the future development, and then on top of that, they'll be putting that 26-foot tall antenna to accommodate both AT&T and Verizon. And you may have noticed on the plans these boxes on top of each corner of the structure. When the project is completed, the facilities will be moved to stealth facilities that will be disguised as these bulkheads that would look like a stairwell or an elevator bulkhead, so that they are out of sight and will not be unsightly like this proposal or like what is existing. So staff is recommending approval with the recommended conditions because it meets applicable standards and it meets the applicable design guidelines. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh wait, I apologize. The applicant is here and she is ready to answer any questions that you have as well. She did not prepare a presentation, but will be here to walk through anything,
Great.
especially cell provider related, that is beyond my expertise.
Are there any questions for staff or the applicant? Can you turn your, yeah.
I just had a question. I built a residential tower in a different part of the country, and there were a lot of questions concerning the health of residents below this. I'm just asking a question just to make certain that we're not opening ourselves up to the residents then saying, you know, I was fine until I moved in and now I'm not. Is there any kind of data that you have that would allay those kinds of fears?
I'd like to say thank you all for your time, first of all, to start with. And I don't personally have any data. The Federal Communications Commission regulates cell phone towers, so exposure levels from cell phone towers must comply with the FCC radio frequency radiation exposure guidelines, which were developed to protect the public from RF-related health risks. So with this being regulated by the FCC and not local jurisdiction, you would need to defer to the city's attorneys as far as your concerns.
So we can safely say that we're not approving something that
Yes,
is
correct.
Okay, fair enough.
And we are already existing there, and there are no changes
Fair enough.
as far as
Thank you.
RF exposure. You bet.
State your name for the records.
And my name is Kelly Glass Adams, for the record.
And who are you with?
J5 Infrastructure Partners on behalf of Verizon.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mike, well, I have a question about sequencing. Like, at what point in the construction will this be integrated into the building? I'm just trying to
Gotcha.
kind of picture this in my head.
So it will begin with demolition of the parking structure. Here, the light gray. You can see, it's kind of hard to see, but the facilities are on top of the Sitla building here. So they begin with demolition of the parking structure and Big Daddy's Pizza. Construction of the cast-in-place stair tower and the CMU structures that will house the electrical equipment for both providers. At which point, that antenna and the electrical equipment will be moved to the stair tower and the CMU structures. And then they will demolish the Sitla building. And then construction will happen around this cast-in-place stair tower that will eventually be incorporated into the structure. They will then, later on when the building is mostly in place, they will install the stealth housing at each corner of the four corners of the building. And then the antennas will be moved to that location, at which point the antenna structure that you are reviewing today would be removed. And those conditions that are listed in the staff report are there to help move things along and keep the interested parties accountable through the process.
So is there a risk where the Sitla building would be demolished and then the cell towers would be moved, and then we'd have this tower there if the development for some reason did not move forward?
That's a pretty common concern. There is the tower of this height, a roof-mounted tower taller than 15 feet, requires conditional use approval. This will be going before the administrative hearing officer on June 22nd. And within that conditional use request, staff is recommending a condition in which all interested parties enter into a development agreement to ensure timely removal of the antenna and to accommodate the possibility of the developer walking away with a half-finished structure and what that will look like so that it does not remain in that state for an extended period of time. That requires a little bit of finagling. That's why staff is recommending that for that other application, that development agreement, and that will be discussed among attorneys.
Great, yeah, that's probably better for the attorneys than the Historic Landmark Commission. Why are we reviewing this if it's going to be integrated into construction? To me, it's just like, it's just a part of the construction of a project that we just approved. Like, what makes this different than, why don't we have to approve the stair towers at the Elks building? Like other, I shouldn't name a different development, but other developments, why have we not had to approve the stair towers?
That's a good question. Currently, our wireless telecommunication facilities zoning requirements do not have interim during construction allowances that would permit a permanent structure of that height during development. Not permanent, permit a structure to be constructed there at that location that would then be taken down. This was sort of the process that worked out for all parties. It's not just the city and the developer, it's the city, the developer, and two different cellular providers with different priorities.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, why does AT&T get to be on top and Verizon below them?
But we want to know.
And you promise this isn't going to be a fake tree, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay, then I'm good.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to open up a public hearing then. Thanks for the presentation. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this matter? I haven't received any cards. Okay, hearing none, we will close the public hearing and go into executive session.
John, I don't have any questions. This seems pretty straightforward. It's something that was there. It's being relocated. I was concerned that just we didn't want to approve anything that somehow would come back to the commission because it didn't meet safety requirements, but it appears that that's not an issue. So I don't have any questions.
Anything else? It's kind of a novelty for us, but at least for me on this commission, I don't know. I would entertain a motion.
A lot of reading.
I will take it on. Based on the information presented and discussed, I move that the commission approve this application based on staff's recommendation, which includes the following conditions. Conditional use approval for a roof-mounted facility higher than 15 feet above the roof of a building in the TSA UNC district. The owner of the property shall direct AT&T and Verizon, as applicable, to remove all of their respective antennas and associated equipment located in the pole on top of the stair tower as soon as practicable following the completion of the Trolley North development project. The owner of the property shall cause the antenna structure located on top of the stair tower to be removed within 180 days following the date in which the temporary equipment is removed, and the wireless communications facilities owned by AT&T and Verizon are fully operational within the project.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Amanda made the motion. Kenton seconded. Kenton?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Carlton?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Emily? Aye. And I am an aye, so that motion passes unanimously. And that's the end of our agenda tonight, so this meeting is adjourned until next month, which is July 13th. It's held not on the first Thursday because of the July 4th holiday, so it'll be July 13th, same time in this room. Thank you.